Welcome to this edition of Probation Matters. We're joined this month by Assistant Director Emer Loughran, who's the Assistant Director for the Urban Region. Welcome, Emer.
Thanks, Gail.
Emer, I wanted to start off by asking you a little bit about your career in probation. You started off as a probation officer back in the early 2000s and you've worked your way through as an area manager and assistant director. Can you tell us a bit about your journey through probation?
Okay, well, I suppose my journey started before I even became a probation officer with probation when I was a student social worker. On my first student placement, I came into contact with probation by accompanying a young person from the placement that I was working with to his probation appointment. And at that appointment, I came into contact with Siobhan McAlea, probation officer up in the Portadown office. And it was through sitting in with her appointment with the young person that I became more knowledgeable about probation and got a bit of an insight into the role of probation. And that was where my interest first began for working within probation. So then when the placements came around for your second student placement within university, I had expressed an interest for probation and was lucky enough to get a placement within probation and was based within the Newry team. So I completed my placement there and then I did leave and go to social services for 6 months and then came back in December 2008 and returned to the Newry probation office. And that's where I worked then as a probation officer for a number of years before moving to the intensive supervision unit in Belfast, where I stayed for maybe close to 7 years and then applied for an area manager post just when I returned from maternity leave because I wanted something different and just wanted to further my career. So my first area manager post then was up in Mid-Ulster, and that was a big leap from probation officer to area manager, but an enjoyable one. I've always found that the colleagues around you within probation are always very supportive and very willing to help, and I've always had good managers within probation who have given good direction and provided good support. So I moved from Mid-Ulster then to the assessment unit, and then from the assessment unit to manage North Belfast, which was a co-managed site. And again, that was an experience in itself, just given the challenges within managing a team within Belfast due to the staffing issues and the complexity of service users' needs.
And North Belfast is a tough area. I mean, you're there in Dunkirk Gardens, right in the middle, I suppose, of the peace line, and it's a busy office. It has its challenges. Do you want to just touch on some of those in terms of the issues you were facing? High levels of deprivation in the area, high levels of mental health. That must have seen that coming through the doors.
Yes, you would have seen high levels of deprivation, as you say, increased homelessness, difficulties with service users' mental health, which probably spiralled a bit more over COVID times when I was based up there, and limited access to services and just the whole impact of COVID and being on lockdown and what this meant for our service users. There was a lot increased drug use within North Belfast, from a range of drugs to prescription, non-prescribed prescription medication to illegal substances, and the difficulties with jail diagnosis with the service users within that area and the access to services or the limited access to services due to the procedures within the healthcare around jail diagnosis and addressing addiction issues before you can move on to address your mental health. So there's a lot of complexity within North Belfast in terms of our service users' needs, and alongside the fact that we had quite a high turnover of staff throughout that period, some moving internally within the organisation and then some also leaving. So there was busy caseloads and some very dedicated staff who have stayed and are 100% credit to the organisation given their commitment and their ability to work under pressure and to take on that extra work due to challenging times.
So you applied for the assistant director post then last year and were successful in that. And what made you want to take that step then forward from an area manager into an assistant director? And again, what's the experience of that been like for you, having worked in probation your entire career?
So suppose I applied for the assistant director post because I had thought, where do I go next? And I wanted a different challenge. You know, North Belfast was challenging and I did enjoy the role and I did enjoy the work, but I wanted something a bit different. So that encouraged me to apply for the assistant director post. It's been a steep learning curve, but not overly steep in a way, because I suppose having worked in the organisation for so long, I was aware of what the assistant director role entailed and what to expect from that. But it's just changing your mindset and adapting to working with new staff. So you're working with an area manager group as opposed to the probation officer group, and just the new areas of work which had opened up for me. So it has been enjoyable and challenging, but definitely interesting and something that I'm glad I've applied for.
So you have a really broad portfolio, Emer, right across the board. Practice standards, linking in with the police service, linking in with some of the projects like Aspire. Do you want to maybe just say a little bit about practice standards? We talk about it a lot in-house, but maybe externally people don't necessarily understand just why standards is so important to us, and a bit about the work you're doing in terms of future-proofing the organisation in relation to standards.
Well, practice standards are really important because they provide that clear and consistent set of standards to staff, and that provides staff with the basis, or practitioners with the basis to then apply their professional judgment. So overall, organisationally then we have that consistent approach to how we respond to service users to address both their needs and risks. At the moment we're undertaking a review, or undertaken some work around establishing whether we need to fully review practice standards given the change of times and the complexity of our service users' needs, alongside with the issues we have in terms of staffing and the issues with staff and deficits within the team, to ensure the practice is safe.
So, Emer, the caseload must have changed quite a bit from your beginnings in 2008. Do you want to talk a little bit about just how the caseload has changed and how the trends in probation have changed, what you've seen develop since the beginning of your journey?
I suppose it all depends on the area you've worked in. So within Uri, I would have seen a lot of young people coming through probation, more young people than maybe we would have seen within the Belfast teams. Different type of crimes or different type of offence type within different areas. So it's quite hard to identify the change in trends, but I suppose what I have noticed in terms of service users' needs is just the increased complexity between mental health and drugs and addictions in general, and just the supports that are available within the community to support the service users. There's also been an increase in homelessness, which I've noticed, and a lack of services around that, or a lack of accommodation. But I mean, I would assume that every organisation is experiencing the same issues. So that would be more of the increased change in trends that I've noticed, as opposed to anything else. It's just the service users' needs have changed.
Yeah. And housing is always a big issue. You know, when we go out into the offices, you know, teams, especially Belfast-based teams, are talking about housing. And I suppose that's why partnerships that we have are so important, be it with the housing executive or with other criminal justice agencies. And that partnership work, you're linking in with police, you're the lead for the organisation in terms of PSNI. Do you want to say a little bit about just how those partnerships benefit both service users and probation staff?
I mean, the partnerships between both police and social services and housing, and even our community and voluntary sector partners are vital really for supporting service users. You know, without that joined up working approach, you know, it would be more difficult to support a service user. You know, we all need to be working together and communicating and sharing information, and that is what the ultimate aim is, to support service users. You know, so having those relationships, without those relationships really, we wouldn't be successful in supporting our service users to achieve change.
Yeah. And I suppose just a bit about somebody who's come through the organisation. We have 8 new probation officers who started off with us this month. I suppose, what would you say to them in terms of enjoying, benefiting, valuing what probation has been to them? What advice would you give them?
To enjoy your role, you know, and adhere to your standards. You know, practice standards are that guide, they're there, but whilst you have the ability to use your professional judgment, you know, they do provide great guidance in terms of how we work with service users. So adhere to your standards, enjoy your role, and don't be too hard on yourself. You can only do what you can do, but as long as you have your service users' needs and the risk at the heart of what your intervention is, you know, you will support service users to achieve change.
Thank you, Emer, for talking to us today about your time in probation and your role as an Assistant Director. To find out more about probation as it works to change people's lives, you can visit our website at www.pbni.org.uk or follow us on our social media platforms on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube.